Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, what will the Minister of Defense, NG Motshekga, tell the Portfolio Committee on Defense and International Relations regarding her contradictory views about the political statements the chief of the SANDF made when he was in Iran? First, the minister said those comments were unfortunate, and then 2 days later made a U-turn and defended the statements. Where exactly does she stand? We speak to the Defense Committee Chair in Parliament, Dakota Legoete. Also on the show, will the Commission of Inquiry into political interference in the TRC cases be able to uncover why the cases have stalled? Will the work of that inquiry bring about justice for the victims of apartheid atrocities and their families? We'll speak to Lionel Adendorf, who is the spokesperson for the TRC's cases inquiry, and former TRC Commissioner Yasmin Sooka. And then later, how does Rise Msanzi want the GNU to be reset? The organization says the coalition government needs a reset instead of lurching from crisis to crisis, and has bemoaned that it last convened a meeting in March amid the budget crisis. We speak to the party's Chief Whip, Makashule Gana. But first, my comment. So, the ANC has raised concerns about the recent utterances of its NEC members, Malusi Gigaba and Senzo Mchunu. The party believes that the comments are decampaigning against it. The organization says it disapproves of the pair's recent conduct and public statements, which violate the ANC's internal communications protocol. As you may have seen, last week, Malusi Gigaba said he thought the start of the national dialogue should be delayed, basically agreeing with the legacy foundations that have pulled out. He also said that he doesn't think the DA was the right party to partner with in the GNU.
When we went to the 2024 elections, we actually did not take into consideration the progress that had taken place since 1994. So we come back to people and say to them that we've built 5 million houses. Yeah, sure, they've had this before. We've provided so many millions of people with water. They've had this before. What is the new thing that you are presenting to them? A new exciting agenda that says to them, now that you've also provided NSFAS and you have hundreds of thousands of young people who are going through the education, the higher education system, be it the TVET colleges or universities, what is it that you are now saying you are going to do as your topmost priority in order to get these young people to participate in the productive economy? In actual fact, to the contrary, unemployment is still rife. You may want to gerrymander with the statistics, but the fact remains, unemployment remains rife. The economy is not growing. People are still struggling to earn a sustainable income. And that's the issue we should now be thinking about, how to package this and present an exciting program to the people.
So over the weekend, Mchunu suggested that the ANC was on the verge of collapse, saying that the party could face its end if support continues to decline at the polls. Lindiwe Sisulu also shared the same sentiments.
Basically, we are so ideologically at variance with the DA. I cannot imagine how it would be for us now, with all the problems that we have, be able to take the country forward, having to drag along people that are not, they don't have the same issues on their shoulders as we do. We have been in government for a very long time. The electorate has punished us over and over because we have not been able to deliver on the things that they need most and on the things that we have promised them. We would need at this point to very seriously take on a partner or partners that will help us deliver on the promises that we have made since God knows when, 1994.
So you can listen to the different leaders of the African National Congress almost share the same sentiments. I don't think this is the first time that such comments are being made by ANC leaders. There are several of them who have spoken in similar ways about the organization. So why go after these ones? And that's really the question here. In fact, President Cyril Ramaphosa has spoken about the ANC being corruption accused, number one. He said other frank things about the organization. So frank, genuine assessment of the state of the organization has been there and has been made by several leaders. Now, the ANC says that Gigaba and Mkunu's remarks do not reflect the views of any legitimate structure of the ANC and are seen as an opportunistic assault on its image and credibility. What are your thoughts? The question we're asking you tonight is, what do you make of the ANC's position on Gigaba and Mkunu, especially given that there are many other leaders in the organization that have given their frank assessment of this party. It's not the first time that leaders express such sentiments. You can send us a WhatsApp voice note right now on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and your surname and where you're sending the voice note from. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. Now, the Commission of Inquiry tasked with probing allegations of political interference in apartheid-era cases says it will be holding pre-hearing meetings with interested persons and institutions. Remember, the advocate who had in fact recommended that there must be a commission of inquiry into whether there was in fact political interference. The NPA in fact had asked the advocate to do so, and the president has since come out to establish this commission of inquiry. Let's bring in now Lionel Adendorf, who's the spokesperson of the inquiry, joining me now via Zoom. Thank you so much, Mr. Adendorf, for making time for us. Good evening.
Thank you so much. It's nice being with you, Clement, and warm welcome to your viewers.
So why is the commission embarking first on a pre-hearing meeting ahead of the main commission? There are some asking, what's the point of bringing all these institutions and interested persons in a meeting first before beginning the actual work?
Thank you so much for that, for the opportunity to engage with your viewers and to clarify the TRC cases inquiry stance on the matter. To repeat what Justice Rampepe, our chairperson, said this afternoon, one, we do not want, this is not a rerun of the TRC process. But we do understand that when a family member has been killed, the family has obviously been traumatized by that experience. They were also traumatized throughout this experience, even when they gave testimony or evidence at the TRC hearing itself in the late 1990s. And this time around, we would assume then that if a 50-year-old mother or a 50-year-old widow who gave testimony or evidence at the time, it's now 30 years later, she will be 80 years old. Yeah. And that's why the TRC cases inquiry felt that it is important that, one, we need to be sympathetic, we need to be understanding, and we need to be empowering in our approach. And that is why we decided to have a meeting where we want to discuss an approach, but also how do we move forward given the timelines and the budgets available, so that we can streamline our processes and make sure that we meet all the objectives in our in the promulgation that was issued in May.
Yeah, and speaking of trauma, there is a possibility of re-traumatizing the very people that you're seeking justice for. How is this commission going to protect those victims from re-traumatization?
The TRC cases inquiry has made it very, very clear on the guidance of Justice Sisi Rampepe, our chairperson, that we want to offer psychosocial support to those who want to come and submit evidence, those who want to engage with us. And we need a broadened and a better understanding of how things have changed over the years for that particular family or the relatives of that victim, and then make sure that we have an approach that is really, really sympathetic and would not ensure that, yes, there will obviously be emotions, there would obviously be tears, but we want to make sure that our witnesses and those who come to provide evidence would then be supported in all imaginable ways. A second way of doing this is obviously to make sure that the Commission and its work are accessible to those communities. And some part of it might mean that we need to go to the communities, the provinces where we get some of these submissions from, or where people say, but hey, come and listen to me. And that is why the commissioners, that is our chairperson, Justice Sisi Gampepe, the retired Northern Cape Judge President Homo, and then also Advocate Gabriel, they made a real call on all of us to make sure that we reach those people and that we reduce the cost of effort in accessing the commission.
Yeah. What kind of people are you looking at calling as witnesses? I know previously there have been suggestions about whether or not the former president, Thabo Mbeki, for instance, will be called in. I know the foundation, Thabo Mbeki Foundation, once released a statement with the former president dismissing the claims that were made as pure fabrication, the claims that have been made, for instance, around political interference. Vusi Pikoli is one of the people, as the former head of the NPA, who started talking about this, so to speak. Are these the kind of people you will be calling as the inquiry to come and testify? What are we looking at here as possible witnesses?
We would not like to preempt the pre-hearing engagement with the families of victims or the representatives of those families. And secondly, we also do not want to preempt what we would get in the submissions that people would want to make or the evidence that we would want to receive. But I do want to re-emphasize that our work relies heavily on Chapter 6 of the final TRC report that is dealing with the amnesty issues. And the second thing that I think is also important that we need to mention is that, one, yes, we are concerned about those that have been accused of atrocities and who have not been investigated and who have not been prosecuted. That is the one part. But we are also concerned, as you have rightfully pointed out, with why is it that a particular case or a number of cases have not been prosecuted or have not been investigated. And we hear various stories about political interference. The Commission at this stage do not have an opinion because we have not even called witnesses. We have not even received any testimony. We have not even started to put pen to paper on the report. So we do not want to say what we will get and where we will find it and what the final conclusions would be. But we really want to nurse this process and allow the South African population, the victims and their families, to engage with us as honest and frank as possible. And we will make the various important assessments at the time when we can.
Will you have the powers to subpoena anyone you may want to come and testify?
That is one power that the TRC cases inquiry has, and we would obviously use it if it's necessary. But again, that is up to the commissioners as and when or who or in what instances we would do it. But that is not for now. We would want to assess and see at the time.
Okay, you mentioned that there's a section that deals with amnesty. Well, can you just clarify more on that? What does that mean in terms of the information that will be shared there and the people who will be sharing information that, I don't know, may be incriminating?
Look, as Justice Gampepe have explained this afternoon, that during the TRC, many people were accused of atrocities. Others came voluntarily and admitted to certain atrocities. Then there were a process of amnesty where you would be pardoned, if I can use that word, for the crimes that you have admitted if you were telling the truth and the full truth, and then you would have been pardoned. Then there is obviously a group that, one, were accused of atrocities and they have never even gone to the TRC. A second group is then those people who have gone to the TRC, but they were not given amnesty. And then if you were not then given amnesty, then there were suggestions that you should be investigated and your crimes and atrocities should be then prosecuted. And that has not happened. And those are the two groups, if I may call it that we are actually interested in. And the whole volume 6 of the final TRC report is specifically dealing with the Amnesty Committee's recommendations and decisions.
The proclamation by the President said the Commission should complete its work within, I think, 6 months of its signing, if I'm not mistaken. Justice Kampepe has been known to complete her commissions within the allocated time. Will she be able to complete this work this time around within that time, especially given just how complex the matter is?
Thank you very, very much for emphasizing Justice Kampepe's record on this. But there is one issue that we have discussed this afternoon, that the Commission has started 2 months later. We officially only opened our offices on the 1st of August, so we do have that 2-month backlog. But Justice Kampepe, Judge President Homo, and Commissioner Gabriel have given us the strict timeline to make sure that we complete the work within the available 4 months, and then the report obviously within the 3 months thereafter.
Okay.
But they have said, let us look and assess at every time what we need to do, if we need to apply for an extension. And Justice Kampepe, as enthusiastic and as diligent as she is, has said to the entire team, let's try. But at the time when we see that it would not be possible, let us then consider all our options. The second thing that I think is important to mention is we do not know who would come forward. We only know about the 23 families now. We will issue at the right point a call for others to come forward as well. And we do not know what we would expect. And it would be based on that we will then be able to make a very fair assessment of the time needs, the budget needs. But I can assure the nation that, as you have rightfully highlighted, Justice Kampepe is known for the fact that she stays within budget and within times, and she has given us, she begged us to make sure that she's not failing on that record of hers.
All right. Lionel Adendorf, thank you so much for speaking to us. He speaks on behalf of this inquiry that will be looking into why the TRC cases have been stalled. I mean, it still boggles one's mind that, over 30 years into our democracy, we're still talking about why there haven't been successful prosecutions, really. A lot of those, when you look at the TRC cases, the commissioners of the TRC at some point were forced to even write a letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa asking what's going on. How are we going to heal as a country if we can, at the very least, follow up on the recommendations of the TRC? Let's stay with that story now. 23 families have alleged in pending High Court proceedings that there has been political interference in prosecuting apartheid-era crime. Let's bring in Yasmin Sooka, who is a human rights lawyer and a former TRC commissioner. Thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Let me maybe start with what your hopes are as the former commissioner of the TRC. When you look at this inquiry now that's going to begin its work, do you have any hopes that there will be justice for the victims and the families of the victims of the apartheid atrocities?
I mean, that's really the reason why the 23 families and the Foundation for Human Rights launched this application, because number one, they want the Commission to deal with this question of the political interference and really to establish who in government, whether they were senior government officials, whether they were cabinet ministers, what role did they play in really suppressing the prosecutions. And that's quite an important step. But the two other issues, which of course, we argued in court the other day, is the question of a declaration by the court that the victims' rights have been violated by the delays and suppression. And the second is the question of constitutional damages. The Commission of Inquiry, the President did seek to include these two issues in the mandate of the Commission. And that's something that we, on behalf of families, have opposed, because, that's only a court can deal with those issues of the declaration and, of course, the question of the constitutional damages.
Yeah.
So our hopes are really that, Judge Kampepe and her colleagues will really get to the bottom of who is responsible for the violation of the rights of the victims, but also who is responsible for the political interference.
Who do you think that the inquiry needs to look to as possible witnesses? Because when Vusi Pikoli made the claim, when it was even mentioned at the Supreme Court of Appeals many of those years ago, there have been suggestions about the players that may have been involved here. Do you, as former TRC commissioners, as people that have really been watching even the claims that have been made, think that there are certain people who definitely have to be called to testify?
Of course we do. We have, views about the fact that when you look at the material period, it's between 2003 and 2017. You also have the fact that even though we have no names of government officials in the application, you had former President Mbeki and former Minister of Justice Bridget Mabandla apply to court to intervene in the case. And of course, the judge dismissed that on the basis that actually they should go before the Commission of Inquiry. Now, they have put themselves there as people who have evidence. And I think it's going to be important that they, in fact, have the opportunity to speak to the Commission. But, a number of people have been named in task force minutes, dealing with this question of some kind of effort to procure another form of deal for perpetrators. And so I think it's going to be important that the Commission looks at that and also invites those people to testify before the Commission. Now, of course, people like Vusi Pikoli and Anton Ackerman and Chris McAdam and Chari Pretorius, all of whom in affidavits filed before the courts at different times have spoken about the political interference and the moratorium on the question of investigations and prosecutions. And obviously, they're going to have to appear before the Commission as well. The other thing which sits behind all of this is that the generals have always argued that, in fact, there was a deal struck that they would not be prosecuted. And even the late president, former President de Klerk, he actually said that, why are we prosecuting when there was this deal? And so I do think it's an opportunity to get to the bottom of that as well.
Okay. And in terms of, because you mentioned there that there was no agreement. In fact, I'm looking at what the presidency had said at the time when he said that the parties have agreed on the establishment of the inquiry. And he said that what the parties were not able to agree on is a settlement on other matters in the application. And that includes for an order that declares the actions of various government entities unlawful and a violation of applicants' rights, as well as the payment of constitutional damages by the state. Do you expect that the inquiry will be able to deal with this, or is that outside of the ambit of the inquiry and this must be dealt with by the actual state, the president?
This is an issue that we argued in court a few weeks ago, because the president actually launched an application to stay, those two aspects of the application that we brought. And in fact, we took the view that a commission of inquiry makes recommendations, they cannot make a judicial ruling on either the question of constitutional damages or on the question of unlawfulness. And this is something that we pointed out before the judge. And so, our expectation is that the court will in fact decide that, those two issues will have to be dealt with by the court. And in fact, the Commission's mandate will only be to look into the question of the political interference and the question really of whether or not there was another deal that was offered to perpetrators. And this is perhaps one of the weaknesses of commissions of inquiry. They don't have the capacity to make binding recommendations. And if you look at, the TRC recommendations, you look at the recommendations by the Zondo Commission, you see that, commissions can make very good recommendations, but at the end of the day, it really is up to the politicians to make sure that those are in fact implemented.
Yeah, they are the implementing agents, and often they have failed us after having spent so much money, of course, establishing these kind of inquiries. Let's hope that this will lead to justice for those families and their victims. Thank you so much for making time for us. That is, of course, the human rights lawyer, Yasmin Sooka. She was one of the commissioners at the TRC Commission. We'll be back after the break. And of course, when we return, we'll speak to the Defense Committee Chair, Dakota Legoete, about the statements that were made by the SANDF chief. In fact, our focus is on the minister's reaction, because first, the minister released a statement distancing herself from those comments and calling them unfortunate. In fact, we spoke to the minister's spokesperson on this show on Thursday last week. And then over the weekend, the minister makes a U-turn and says, well, he didn't say anything wrong, even though just 2 days earlier, she said the comments were unfortunate. We'll speak to Dakota Legoete about that. Here's a question that we've been asking you, though. What do you make of the ANC's reaction to Malusi Gigaba and Senzo Mkunu's recent comments about the state of the party? You can send us a WhatsApp voice note, tweet us as well. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans and that of International Relations have expressed concern over the reported remarks made by General Rudzani Maphanywa, the chief of the South African National Defence Force, during his recent visit to Iran. Maphwanya is reported to have made political statements and comments against Israel and in support of Palestine. Dakota Legoete is the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans. Mr. Legoete, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening to you, Clement, and to all the viewers at home.
Let's start with your reaction as the Defence Committee. How do you assess these political statements that were made by the chief of the SANDF? Part of what he said was that his visit in Iran is actually a political message.
Thank you very much once more. Our position as the Portfolio Committee is more on what the Chief of the National Defence Forces has said. It is more on the disjuncture of the message from the executive, in particular Department of International Relations and Cooperation, which distanced itself from the message of the Chief, from the Department of Defense, which had two messages from the minister, and from the presidency, which said the matter is what the chief said, it's still advised. Now, from our side as the Portfolio Committee, we want to get clarity from the executive, because we play oversight on the executive, both the presidency, the Department of DERCO, and the Department of Defense are accounting to Parliament and to Portfolio Committees. It is quite disturbing that from the same country, from the same flag, from the same national interest, from the same foreign policy, we have contradicting messages which create a problem. in terms of the function of statecraft, in terms of synergy of our message, unity and cohesion, in terms of what we stand for as a country. And that's what we want to establish.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, for us to even have a conversation about the varying responses to the comments that have been made, we would have to start with the comments that have been made. Hence, I'm asking you about, as the committee, what your assessment is. The presidency has called out the SANDF chief for the political statements he made. In fact, the president said the trip was ill-advised. The International Relations Department distanced itself from the statements. Even the minister said that the statements were unfortunate, only to come back 2 days later and say, well, there's nothing wrong with that, which is a bit confusing. Are you more concerned about the disagreements from the executive in as far as the responses to the comments that are made? Or are you also concerned about what the chief of the SANDF has said in dabbling in politics, which is the domain of the president and the International Relations Department?
Look, in terms of the architecture of for international relations, you know, in all embassies, we're represented by the ambassador, the consulate, and the military attaché. There is a relationship between political diplomacy, economic diplomacy, and military diplomacy.
Yeah.
And that is done by our embassies on behalf of all of us. So we expect that the executive, as the executing authority of all policy positions, including the Constitution, whenever they speak at a global or international platform, they speak on behalf of the nation and they are representatives of the president.
Okay, I think we may have lost Dakota Legoete there, who is the chair of the Defense Committee, who was just talking to us now about what the response of the committee is, but also the concerns that he has together with the International Relations Committee, because it's both those committees that want to sit with Minister Motshekga, and there are some concerns from them because the president says one thing, the International Relations says one thing, and the Minister of Defense seems to take a completely different position. I'm told that we've got Mr. Legoete back on the line. Mr. Legoete, you can continue the point you were making.
No, the point I was making is that the issue that is at play, it's our lack of coordination in terms of our statecraft. A state represents one flag, it represents one national interest, it represents one foreign policy in whatever it does. And that's why, as portfolio committees, we feel very strong that we need to get clarity from the executive, why on one position, on one statement, they would speak in folk tongues, because this has a potential to put up a reputational damage to us as a nation, but also to put doubts from other nations in terms of trust relationship.
Yeah.
Because currently we are aware that there are trade tariff negotiations, there are trade wars, and some of these things are part of what we understand to be a war of what we call an economic hitman.
Yeah.
It's not a conventional war where you soldiers in uniform from a possible political or diplomatic embarrassment, so that we get clarity from the executive as the executing authority of what is happening, because they speak in folk tongues. And as the portfolio committee, as parliament, which is very clear in terms of lawmaking, we have a foreign policy, we have a national interest, we have a national agenda.
Yeah.
We are very clear. There must be no doubt which may put the whole nation's reputation into question when it comes to our counterparts elsewhere in the globe. And that's what we want clarity on. We want the minister to clarify, because we don't even want to judge the chief or the general. We would want government to be clear and upright in terms of what we stand for.
Okay, and how do we ensure that alignment? Because as you say, there's a worrying lack of coordination between defense diplomacy and the country's foreign policy, as in matters of SA's foreign policy and international relations are the sole prerogative of the President and DERCO. How do you think we can ensure that alignment?
Look, we are happy that the Presidency has announced that they will meet with the Department of Defense and Department of International Relations, as well as the Chief of the National Defense Force. We are awaiting that meeting. Once we have received a report on the outcome of that meeting, we will be in a position to get clarity as the portfolio committees and Parliament in terms of our oversight role, because we can't afford any situation that can set us up into a vulnerable position against an economic hitman in a war, in a global geopolitics, which is defined by trade wars, by increases of trade tariffs, and we end up with a sluggish economy with hundreds and thousands of people losing their jobs because somebody was reckless in clarifying the position of the nation.
Yeah. Mr. Legoete, let me ask you to please put on your hat as an ANC NEC member just for a minute. The ANC says it wants to take action against Malusi Gigaba and Senzo Mkhunu regarding the comments that they recently made around the organization. Do you think that there is a problem that's emerging with ANC leaders decampaigning the party, you know, to use the words that were, of course, in the ANC statement?
No, thank you very much. In relation to that particular point you are raising, I have serious limitations because there is a chief political administrator, normally referred to as the Secretary General. He has made pronouncements. It's incumbent upon us as leaders and as members of the ANC to respect the authority of that office and understand that we have to comply with whatever request that has been made. For now, I will not be in a position to make an input because I'm here in a capacity as the chair of the Portfolio Committee of Defense. I apologize, I have limitations.
No worries, no need to apologize at all. Just wanted to get that comment if possible. Absolutely appreciate those limitations. Dakota Legoete, thank you so much for coming through to chat to us on Face the Nation. Looking forward to what the Minister of Defense will say in as far as explaining the contradictory messages that she sent out in as far as the comments made by the SANDF chief in Iran are concerned. Let's look at your tweets that have come through now. We've been asking you about that specific issue that I've asked Dakota Legoete around the ANC's decision on Malusi Gigaba and Senzo Mkhunu. As I said earlier on, Lindiwe Sisulu, the President Cyril Ramaphosa. It can go on and on. There are several ANC leaders that have almost made similar comments, not so similar, but they've given expressions about the state of the organization. But this time around, the ANC expressing dissatisfaction with what Senzo Mkhunu and Malusi Gigaba have said. Sabelo on Twitter says, I think these two are getting finger pointing because they are both influential leaders serving in current government and they're both from KwaZulu-Natal. Now, KZN is extremely important to the ANC and they want to salvage whatever is left from the masses that went to the MK in KZN. And of course, Senzo Mkhunu is the one that is not suspended, maybe the police minister who's been put on special leave. But Malusi Gigaba is a former minister, not currently in government. Mandlendota says Dr. Malusi Gigaba and Mkhunu were speaking the truth. And if the ANC is serious about reviving itself, then it should listen to those voices. Lehasa says the truth must be told. ANC is losing members on a daily and collapsing. The ANC can't make it to 2026 local government elections and the 2029 national. That's a message there from Lehasa. Thank you so much for your WhatsApps that are coming through. And of course, a lot of you are asking, did these two leaders actually lie? But as Dakota Legoete said, and in fact the ANC statement indicated, was that you don't want leaders that are also seen to be decampaigning the organization. Yes, you can express your concerns about where the organization finds itself, but be careful not to decampaign the ANC is the message from the Secretary General. Here's what some of you have said on the voice note line.
Good evening, Clement. We are really living in exciting times. Look, I don't know why the ANC is particularly targeting the two leaders, because you can tell that that is a mutual sense amongst all the leaders of ANC. In actual fact, I'm saying next year, local election, ANC will even go down further to 30%. Sure.
Welcome back. Rise Mzansi has called for a reset of the government of national unity, criticizing the coalition government of lurching from crisis to crisis. The party has also expressed concern that the GNU last convened a meeting in March amid the budget crisis. The party says it will write to the ANC as the convener of the GNU to call for regular and scheduled meetings of the leaders of all the political parties represented in the coalition. Makashule Gana is the Chief Whip of Rise Mzansi, joins us now via video link. Makashule, thanks for making time. Good evening.
A very good evening to you, Clement, and good evening to the viewers.
Let's start with the conversation I just had now with Dakota Legoete, who's the chair of the Defense Committee, around the statements that the SANDF chief has made and how the minister has responded, the Minister of Defense, that is. I saw that as Rise Mzansi, you're calling for the dismissal of the chief of the SANDF. Why a dismissal and not a reprimand? Isn't that an exaggeration?
It is not, Clement, given the severity of the pronouncements that the general did not have, authority to make. And also, what we said yesterday is that given that also his contract is coming to an end, we believe that the successor to him needs to be announced as a matter of urgency so that everyone knows that he's on his way out.
Okay, so, and then the minister, how do you think she must be held accountable?
From our own assessment, Clement, it's given not only on this particular matter, but other matters pertaining to defense. We are not convinced that she's the most suitable person to hold the position of Minister of Defense, and that's why we are asking for the president to redeploy her away from the defense portfolio.
But what has she done for you as Rise Mzansi to hold that opinion? Also, between you and I, is she the only person that's not suitable for a portfolio in this cabinet?
I think the way in which she has basically looked at this matter, almost dismissing it as a serious matter that the general has done, that on its own, coupled with the other issues insofar as the defense force is concerned, we are not convinced that she's the best person to serve as a defense minister.
All right, let's look at the GNU now, because as Rise Mzansi, you've expressed some concerns over the amount of time and energy spent worrying about squabbles between the ANC and the DA, forgetting that there are 9 political parties who have individual agreements with the ANC. How do you hope this GNU can be reset? I mean, whenever I go back to the statement of intent that was signed, there are certain things there that were committed that to this day still haven't found expression in the formation of this GNU. Things like there will be an agreed policy agenda in the GNU that will guide this government. That's still not there. And we get surprised when there are policy differences and all these squabbles.
So what we are calling for, Clement, and we're making an assessment of the year that we've been in Parliament, the year that we've been in the GNU, taking into account, admitting that we're all learning. It was the first time that all of us entered into this kind of an arrangement, and we believe that a year has taught us a lot. It has taught us that just having almost a bilateral agreement between the parties and the ANC is not suitable, that you need a more comprehensive binding agreement that is signed by all parties, not just at the bilateral level as the first thing. The second thing is that for the GNU to succeed, you need a proactive political management structures that will be able to meet regularly, because at the moment the only time that the GNU comes alive, it's when there's a crisis, and you don't have to wait until there's a crisis that now you convene meetings. As you know how the budget was done from the first budget, it was almost created a crisis. Now you had to have one-on-one meetings with the ANC, or the ANC meeting the parties that it signed an agreement with, and then that led to the budget that was eventually passed. So from our assessment, that kind of operation is undesirable to get the country forward, because if you are waiting for a crisis, it means you are failing to plan.
Yeah. Isn't there already a process led by, is it the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, in cases where there's some disagreements, isn't that a platform where those could be resolved?
It was thought to be. So there were effectively two GNU structures. One was the clearinghouse, and the other one was the leaders forum. The clearinghouse, after the first budget was passed, which was eventually taken to court. What then happened is that the ANC, through the SG's office and the people who were negotiating the GNU, took the discussions. It was not the clearinghouse that dealt with those matters. And the last time the clearinghouse met, which I am a member of the clearinghouse, I represent Msanzi in the clearinghouse, was around March. So the bulk of the budget disputes were handled outside of the structures that were established to manage the GNU. And that's why we believe you need a combination of both the clearinghouse, the leaders forum, but also the political parties to be able to manage the GNU going forward, so that there's an agreed position amongst all the parties. One of the things that, for instance, was expressed by members, it's when there are issues that relates to either taking other members of the GNU to court and such kind, that they need to be handled properly, so that you don't have all these squabbles which in a way dent the confidence in the ability of the GNU to deliver on its mandate.
Yeah, but what is the mandate of this GNU? Because if you're telling me that the last time that as the political parties in the GNU met was it in March earlier this year? I mean, if there are no regular meetings and there's no sort of agreed policy agenda of sorts, aren't you moving blind then as the GNU? What's your mandate? What's guiding you when you're not constantly meeting to make sure that the interest of all the parties in this GNU are represented?
It is for that precise reasons, Clement, that we are calling for a proper reset, that all of us needs to come together, have a program, a joint program of action, a joint agreement in terms of how we behave towards one another. Because at the moment, like I said, the agreement that, for instance, that ourselves as Rise Msanzi has, it's with the ANC. We don't have any agreement with the DA or the IFP or the PA. So whatever happens, it's between ourselves and the ANC. And we, having done some assessment, we believe that's inadequate. There needs to be a joint agreement by all 10 members of the GNU. And we will take this matter up with the ANC in the first instance, because we have an agreement with the ANC to say that this is our views in terms of how we believe the GNU needs to be reset. Because the pronouncements that were made, Clement, were around expanding the GNU as a way of resetting. We believe before you even expand, we are not against expanding the number of parties in the GNU, but before you expand, you need to ensure that the political management structures are agreed to and they are in place, so that even as you expand, you don't invite people into a pool of crisis.
Yeah. Would it be wrong to suggest that what's been happening since the GNU was formed is for the parties that have been invited by the ANC to come and join the organization, what's been happening since the formation is that you've just been helping the ANC govern, so to speak. I mean, there are many of their decisions that are being rubber-stamped, which is why you end up seeing the DA raise concerns about budget, raise concerns about other policy issues, rightly or wrongly. But their argument is that there's not a lot of consultation. You talk about lack of meetings here, consistent meetings. So there's someone watching us and probably wondering, so what's the point of having all these parties in the GNU if their interests are actually not going to be clearly stated and represented by the same GNU? Then you're just lekapile ANC, for lack of a better phrase.
I will not arrive at that particular position, Clement, because even when there was a debate around the budget and other matters pertaining to government departments, we've been able, as Rise in Msanzi, I'll speak for ourselves because, as I said, I will not speak to for other parties. We have been able to influence, even not endorse certain positions that might have come from the ANC. But we do this, Clement, not just like to say no, we are part of the GNU, but we believe that there's a potential in the GNU to take the country forward. And the way we do our politics, it's not to, for instance, wait for things to go bad and hope that we'll benefit from that. As Rise in Msanzi, we want to assist the government to succeed, because when the government succeeds, the people of South Africa will succeed and will have a safe, prosperous, equal and united South Africa.
Makashule Gana, thank you so much for speaking to us. Really appreciate your time. And thanks to you for watching the Tuesday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Thursday at 9 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.